The knights and ladies of the Arthurian romances are indeed Celtic gods and goddesses masquerading in human costume. And this is one way of saying that in all of us, in our human activities, deities are operating. Now, according to Wolfram, who really knew what he was talking about, the reason for the enchantment was that the Grail king had been very severely wounded by a pagan lance. Now, the character of the Grail king is the crux of this whole situation. This was a young man, the Grail king, who had inherited his role. He had not earned it. He was simply anointed as king. The whole problem in the Middle Ages was that the religious life was under the control of the anointed. The salvation of man was through the sacraments, which were handed down through anointed clergy. And whether you were a person of great, majestic spirituality or very trivial character who had made a good confession, you would nevertheless be saved through the ritual magic of the sacraments. You might ask, why should anyone go in quest of the Grail in the Middle Ages when the holy sacrifice of the Mass was being celebrated all around him every day, all the time, and all he had to do was go around the corner, and there was Christ himself in the sacrament of the altar? What more do you want? Well, the point is that the sacrament of the altar was simply sacramental and ritual, and the Grail castle is achieved by one who is worthy of it. A person unworthy, no matter how okay sacramentally, true contrition and perfect confessions and Holy Communion and all that, he's ineligible for it. But as we'll see later, the Grail castle was entered not only by the Grail hero, but also by his Muslim half-brother. So you didn't have to be a baptized Christian to go to the Grail castle. In Wolfram's context, it is the majesty of spirit that counts. Now the character of an enchantment is that there are people all around who know the rules of the enchantment. These are the people of the Grail castle community, but they can't dispel it. The only way the enchantment can be dispelled is by some naive person doing the thing that has to be done unintentionally, out of his nature. To do it intentionally will not break the spell. So you get the point. The rescue of the world is to be through an intrinsic nobility of nature, which is expressed through the hero. The hero in this tradition is called the great fool. He is one who is uninstructed in the secret of the enchantment, and nevertheless, because of the purity, the great fool. The great fool, the integrity and honesty and courage and forthrightness of his nature, is able to restore the proper natural order as against the enforced social order of the anointments. Now here was a king, the Grail king, who was not naturally competent for his job. He had been anointed. No sooner anointed than, as a young man, and properly in the way of young men, he was interested in the adventure of love. So the Grail king, who represents the champion, the guardian of the highest spiritual symbol, goes forth in quest of love with the war cry, Amor. And he encounters on the way a natural man, a pagan, who represents the natural principle, in quest of the Grail. And these two encounter, one being a Christian and the other a Muslim. They immediately go into a combat. And what happens is that the Moor, the Muslim, sends his lance through the genitals of the king so that he is rendered impotent. That is the symbol of the wasteland. The king, who represents its fertilization, its spiritual fertilization, is symbolically rendered impotent. And that king at the same time with his blow slays the Muslim. So, as a result of the fact that the Lord of the Spirit is inadequate to his function, both the world of the Spirit and the world of nature are knocked down, rendered impotent, and that's the wasteland situation. A pall falls over the Grail Castle. The king is carried, he manages to get home, and he is in terrific anguish. And when the head of the lance is extracted from the wound, the name of the Grail is seen written on it. This Muslim was in quest of the Grail. What you have here is spirit in quest of nature, nature in quest of spirit, and neither helping the other but in collision with each other. What we've got to do now is unite the two. There is another enchantment in this same story of Wolfram, which runs parallel to the enchantment of the Grail Castle. This is the enchantment of the Castle of Marvels. This has to do not with the realm of the spirit, but with the realm of love, and let's say physical love, erotics. It has to do with the world of the troubadour love. The story is of a very powerful and well-known and distinguished duke who falls in love with the wife of a noble king of Sicily, who would be probably Frederick II. And in the way of 12th century troubadour love, he becomes the lover of the king's wife. But when the king discovers the two together, the king castrates this man, who is so mortified by this, as well as physically stricken, that he decides on revenge. He goes to Persia and learns tremendously powerful magic. And then he comes back and enchants the whole aristocracy of Europe in a castle known as the Castle of Marvels. All the queens and countesses and everybody else and beautiful women are there, and all the glorious knights and all completely separated from each other, even forgetting who they are. So we have the Castle of Marvels enchanted over here. That represents the sort of wasteland of love, which I spoke of earlier in connection with the Tristan story, and the Castle of the Grail here, the wasteland of the spiritual life. Both the spiritual and the secular worlds of spiritual experience, love and beauty, are under this pall of enchantment through these two castrati. The Klinzor is the name of the one who puts the Castle of Marvels enchantment, and the poor old King Amfortas, young King Amfortas, is the stricken Grail King. And you see your Wagner here already. That's the situation. That's what has to be healed. And there are two heroes available, one for each task. One hero is Percival, who is a young, callow, great fool indeed. And the other, graceful, courteous, lovely Gawain, who is a highly sophisticated philanderer. He is, the love stories, the funny adventures are absolutely beyond belief, but Wolfram manages to present for Gawain as he goes from one to another of these experiences of his, in and out of bed and in and out of battlefields, and all of it going along in grand style. But that all represents part of the enchantment situation. Now, I'll deal first with Percival to show something of the sorts of adventure that lead to the release of the enchantment. The purity. Percival, his father had been killed in courtly combat, and his mother, sick and tired of the whole courtly game, had gone into the forest and had given birth to her child in the forest in a kind of hermitage, and had told her servants never even to mention the world of courtly life to her son. So he grows up as a kind of country bumpkin of glorious beauty. Well, I guess he's something like about 15 or 16 when one day, rambling around the hills, he hears the clatter of hoofs. He's never heard hoofs before. His mother has told him about religion. His mother has told him that God is good and the devil is bad, and he should look out for devils and always be for God. In other words, he is given instruction. The instruction, the normal family instruction about religion that many of us have had. When he sees these shining knights come along, 3 of them, he thinks they are angels. And so he kneels down and prays to them. And the leader, a great duke in a glorious armor with bangles and everything else, he says, "Young man, I am no angel, I am a knight." Now, in the romantic view of the Middle Ages, this awakens in him his noble nature. He has inherited the knightly character of his wonderful knightly father, and even though ignorant of it and living under an illusion, he has been awakened. Now, this is the counterpart of the call to adventure that I mentioned yesterday. The hero is called to adventure. There is a call. And so he says, what is a knight? And he's told what a knight is, and that if he would go to Arthur's court, he would be made a knight. That's when knights are made. So he determines to go to Arthur's court. He goes back to his mother to say, "I want to be a knight," and she faints. Then she determines to make him look like a jackass and send him off to the court so that they'll immediately send him home. So she gets the worst horse he can find, and he picks up a little bunch of javelins that he has fashioned for himself, and she makes a costume for him where the shirt and the pants are all one thing, the sort of thing that fools wear, the costume of a fool, and she sends him forth in this rig to Arthur's court. And she gives him certain advice again. Don't cross streams where the water is deep. When you see a fine, beautiful woman, try to acquire a kiss from her and a ring. And with a few little details like that to give him instruction for life, he starts out. And here he's trotting along, and his mother follows him down the road, and when he passes out of sight, she drops dead. So he's killed his mother, and he didn't mean that either. He's going to go through for a long way, just being the one that knocks things over. He comes to a stream, as Wolfram says, a stream that a rooster could have crossed. But on this horse, with his mother's instruction, he goes along the stream until he finds a place where there's almost no water at all. Then he goes across. The first thing he sees is a tent on a field, beautiful tent. So he drives to the tent, he moves in, and behold, does he see a beautiful girl lying asleep on a bed with the covers way down to her waist. And Wolfram said, and God had made that body. And when he saw it, he noticed that there was a ring on his finger. So this lout jumps on the bed, and the woman wakes up with him trying to get a kiss from her and drag the ring from her finger and so forth. And that way he goes through life. Then when her husband comes back and finds the ruin in the place, he says, what's been going on? He thinks his honor has been destroyed. The boy wouldn't have known how to destroy his honor. He tears the clothes of his wife to shreds and sits her on a horse, and they ride off together, and he's going to look for that guy, and until he finds him, so that the boy hasn't gone 1/2 day, and he's got a major knight of the Arthurian court after him with his wife in distress and everything going to pieces. He arrives in the court, And he sees a knight in red armor with a golden goblet riding out. And the knight says, "You tell Arthur when you go in," when he sees this silly fellow, "that I'm waiting out in the field." Well, what had happened had been, this was a knight who had felt that Arthur owed him some land. Arthur had taken some land. So he'd gone in and insulted the court by taking the queen's cup and dashing the wine in her face, riding out and say, "Who in this court is going to avenge the queen?" This is just one way to provoke a knightly combat. Knightly combat is always engaged in according to the rules. So in goes this lout. He rides into the court and he sees Arthur. He says, "Who's Arthur?" He finds Arthur and he says, "Make me a knight." Kay, who's a tough guy in the court, he says, "Send him out to deal with the Red Knight." All right, the kid turns around, goes out. The Red Knight, he comes riding at him in this silly horse without any lance or anything else, just a packet of javelins. The knight won't even deign to use his lance on him, but turns it around the butt end and gives him a bash with it. The horse falls down, and the kid's on the ground, but he picks up a javelin and tosses it right through the knight's visor and it goes right into his head, and the knight drops dead. This is altogether against knightly rules, so the court has actually been greatly scandalized by this whole thing. They come out to find what's going on out there, and they see this kid dragging the knight around trying to find how to get the armor off. One of the pages helps him get the armor off, shows him how to put it on, but the kid won't take off the clothes underneath. He's got the fool's costume underneath, and he inherits this mighty charger of this knight. He jumps on the darn thing, and he rides at a gallop for the whole day because he doesn't know how to stop the horse. The horse pulls him up at a castle where a magnificent knight receives him, and when they take his armor off, as they always do, they're appalled by what they see here. And of course the symbol is he's still carrying his mother with him all the time, the clothes his mother made, and we're going to try to make him a knight. And this knight sees what a beautiful boy he is, and the knight has an available daughter here. And put things together, men were a little scarcer in those days than they are now, and this all looks like a very good match. So he's perfectly willing to give the boy instructions in knightly arms and so forth, which the kid has a great talent for. And the kid always talks about his mother, so the man says, "Why don't you grow up and talk about your mother and just become a knight according to these rules?" Now, one of the great rules that he tells them, and this is the key rule to the failure of the knight when he comes to the castle the first time, is don't ask too many questions. Be polite. Let people tell you things. Don't be over-curious. He offers him his daughter. The boy has this feeling now. Here's this knightly feeling, the sound thing. I shouldn't marry someone who's just given to me. I must earn my wife. I must earn my life. So, to the man's great sorrow, he rides away, and he's on adventure. The horse takes him to a castle. I won't describe how it is. It's a castle in very bad case. And it is being besieged by a king who has taken all the lands away from this orphan countess, who is the chatelaine, the woman whose castle it is. He wants to marry her by force. Now here again is the medieval social marriage. She was a good match, or at least she had the lands he wanted, and this marriage had come about. But she had sworn that she would not marry anyone except for love. Now, she represents the feminine end of this adventure. She has the integrity not to acquiesce in anything that does not accord with the dictates of her heart. The boy, Percival, is questing for his destiny. She is waiting for hers, and she knows when it isn't there. In other words, refusal of suitors motif that I've already mentioned. and they've never known anything of anything. And he comes in, and he doesn't say a thing. They take the armor off and put him in nice silken garments and all, and he just sits mute. And she thinks, what a funny fellow. He'd been told not to ask any questions. So she thinks, well, perhaps I'll ask questions. So she asks him who he is and so forth. And presently he goes to bed. He wakes up in the middle of the night to find her on her knees beside him in her nightgown, as Wolfram says in the Gear for War. And he says, don't kneel to me, kneel to God. Well, he says, I'll get out of the bed if you want to be here, and I'll go up there. No, she says, you stay in the bed, and if you promise not to wrestle with me, I'll get in there with you. That's exactly what she said. And he didn't know anything about wrestling anyhow, and so in she gets. And then she tells him her story of how the knight has come to take her land, but she would rather throw herself from the castle tower than submit her body to someone she did not love. And he said, well, here he is. I'll kill the knight for you tomorrow. So, indeed he did. He gets on that prodigious horse, and he's been taught now by a master knight how to use his weapons. Out he goes, and this invincible one of the great kings of the world, is knocked down. Well, he has been told that when a man submits to you, you don't kill him. So when he's got him down, the knight submits. He says, I submit. And Percival says, okay, well, you just go into the town there and you become the servant of this girl. Her name is Conduire Amour, the one who conducts love, Conduire Amour, the one who guides love. Well, he said, if I went in there, they'd murder me. Well, then, says Percival, you go to King Arthur's court and submit yourself there to a certain lady whom he named. So this great knight goes. One after another, knights are being sent to Arthur's court by this lout that went out, and the court begins to think, this is somebody worth a place here. The next night, the girl then comes and receives him and says, this is my beloved, and I am his wife. He is lord of the castle. This is marriage out of love, and it constitutes a marriage. There is no priest involved in this at all. She puts her hair up as a married woman. They go to bed a second night together. And it's still a marriage simply of souls. Then the third night, something nice happens. Wolfram says, please excuse me for mentioning it, but he touched her, he found it nice, they interlaced arms and legs, and from that time on, that's how it was. And they thought, this is what we should have been doing all the while. But the point here is that the marriage, just the opposite to that of the other courts, was a spiritual marriage first, and actually a marriage out of love and not out of social purposes. And then gradually the physical thing comes in as the consummation of a marriage that had already been consummated in the spirit. So now he's married, and for a while he's lord of the castle, and then he thinks, he's done this. He's the great knight, he's the greatest knight in the whole world. He thinks, I wonder how Mother is these days. He doesn't know that he's dropped dead when we left. So he starts out to find Mother. He has accomplished the worldly adventure perfectly. Out of his own spirit, he has caused a lot of trouble, but he has surpassed that in his positive deeds. And it's a man in that position, not one who has retreated from the ways of the world, but has mastered them fully, who is eligible for the next adventure, the adventure of the Grail. And it's a man in that position, not one who has retreated from the ways of the world, but has mastered them fully, who is eligible for the next adventure, the adventure of the Grail. And the Grail castle appears to him as he starts out in quest of his mother. What he actually finds is the castle of the Grail.